And we will also be updating them in our chat box from time to time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 11th International Conference on Financial Criminology 2021 with the special theme of Financial Crime Mitigation towards Sustainable Development Goals in Digital Era. To bless our event this morning, I would like to share you the Kitab recitation and a moment of silence. Al-Fatiha.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Amin, amin, ya Allah, ya Rabbal Alamin. Thank you. Now, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Associate Professor Dr. Norbalkish Zakaria, a research fellow from Accounting Research Institute. And inshallah, I'll be with you for this 2 days event. It is my greatest honor and privilege to welcome Yang Dihormati Datuk Sri Akril Sani Abdullah Sani, the Inspector General of Royal Malaysia Police. Yang berbahagia Professor Technology Dr. Roziah Muhammad Jano, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic and International, come exercising the function of Vice Chancellor of University Technology Mara. Director of Accounting Research Institute, Prof. Dr. Jamaliah Said, and our appreciated keynote speakers together with our respected collaborators. Last but not least, foreign and local participants to this event. Dear distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, for your information, today we have more than 60 participants across Asia, Europe, and Africa, making this conference truly an international one. We are here to discuss on various contributions to financial criminology, which also include cross-disciplinary academic areas of accounting, finance, and management. Thank you very much indeed for making this 11th International Conference on Financial Criminology 2021 materialize despite of the difficulties and pandemic crisis of COVID-19. We hope to be able to conclude contribution as these 2 days of conference sessions to academic on all industry players. Without any further delay, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Jamaliah Said to give her welcoming speech.
Can you hear me? Can you all?
Yes,
Yes,
we can.
yes,
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. All praise be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by whose grace and blessing we are able to meet this morning. It is indeed my very great pleasure and privilege to welcome Yang dihormati Datuk Seri Akil Sani bin Haji Abdullah Sadi, Inspector General of Royal Malaysian Police, Yang berbahagia Profesor Teknologi Dr. Hajah Roziah Muhammad Jano, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic and International, University Technology Mara, exercising the function of Vice Chancellor of UiTM, guest speakers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 11th International Conference on Financial Criminology, ICFC. For the past 12 years, ARI has been the host of ICFC conferences, which have been held in many countries like the United Kingdom, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Thailand, and Malaysia. Last year, ARI was forced to call off plans to organize the ICFC at Cambridge University, United Kingdom, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we are living in a vastly different world. The pandemic has changed almost everything of our life. Our lifestyle has changed. Digital technology has become our new norm. COVID-19 has, in fact, accelerated our plan and strategies to migrate to digital age. Simultaneously, digital usage, lockdown, and the transition to remote working has created fertile ground for fraudulent activities, especially cybercrime. Although for the past 3 years, the amount of losses associated with cybercrime seemed to be declining, according to a report, a worrying fact is that the number of cases continue to rise. This proves that cybercrimes have indeed become a problem that warrant our serious attention. This is in line with the conference theme for this year, Financial Crime Mitigation towards Sustainable Development Goals in the Digital Era. This theme emphasizes SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which address issues related to peace, justice, and strong institutions. We are all aware that financial crime in digital era is always timely topic of common interest, an issue that no country can solve it alone. It has no borders, and fraudulent activities have become more sophisticated and complicated than ever before. As such, this conference, which began today, aims to provide a unique gathering which brings together key representatives of academic, enforcement agencies, researchers, policymakers, government officials, business leaders to exchange ideas in order to produce prestigious and breakthrough research findings. A new appropriate solution to mitigate financial crime and to create peace, justice, and strong institutions in line with the SDG. Ladies and gentlemen, our ICFC 2021 delegates covers presenters from many countries such as the United Kingdom, India, Russia, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Zimbabwe, Malaysia, Pakistan, Iran, and Maldives, to name a few. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to our guest speaker on their willingness to share their knowledge and make a significant contribution at this conference. My special thanks goes to Professor Rob McCasker, Transnational Crime Director, Global Risk Line Limited, United Kingdom, the keynote speaker, as the keynote speaker. Professor Mark Barton, Institute of Criminal Justice Studies, University of Portsmouth, United Kingdom. Emeritus Professor Dr. Norma Omar, Accounting Research Institute, UiTM. Dr. Morrison Hale Sheckler, Edinburgh Napier University of Scotland. Professor Dr. Farid Sobani, United International University of Bangladesh. Dr. David, Northwest Institute of Management, Ranipa, St. Petersburg, Russia. And Dr. Mazia Minhat, Edinburgh Napier University of Scotland. Last but not least, allow me to extend my gratitude to the UiTM management, our collaborators, for their continuous support. My special thanks goes to the Royal Malaysian Police, Telkom University of Indonesia, Sambram Academy of Management of Studies India, Polytechnic Negeri Sriwijaya Indonesia, Universitas Putra Bangsa Indonesia, Universitas Islam Negeri Sultan Syarif Kasim Riau, United International University Bangladesh, and Universitas Muhammadiyah Sultan Barat Indonesia for making this event a successful. I also would like to thank the ICFC 2021 committee for their hard work and dedication in making this event a success. Finally, I hope that all delegates and participants will take the opportunity to gain knowledge and networking. I wish you all a successful conference for the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Jamalia Said. Ladies and gentlemen, University Technology Mara, that also known as UiTM, as a globally renowned university, is consistently works towards adding value to a wholesome education through various academic and non-academic experience on campus. UiTM communities are encouraged to organize and participate in various activities within these categories, such as leadership, spiritual, sports, patriotism, entrepreneurship, community service, social and cultural, creativity and innovation, communication skills, and internationalization. To put your curiosity at ease, this very minute, I would like to welcome Yang Berbahagia, Professor Technologist Dr. Roziah Muhammad Jano, to deliver her welcoming speech. Please welcome.
In the name of Allah, the most gracious and compassionate, yang dihormati Datuk Sri Akril Sani Abdullah Sani, Inspector General of Police Malaysia, yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Jamaliah Said, Director Accounting Research Institute, UiTM, guest speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning I bid to everyone. First of all, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Yang dihormati Datuk Sri Akril Sani Abdullah Sani, Malaysia's Inspector General of Police, for joining us online in this International Conference of Financial Criminology, ICFC 2021. We are delighted to have you grace this event with your presence. Thank you, Datuk Sri, for being with us in this momentous and significant occasion. As you may well know, this year marks the 11th edition of the ICFC. It is a continuous initiative of the university to address issues concerning efforts to mitigate financial fraud and to be sensitive to ethics and integrity in everyday routine work. It is important to note that this is a niche area of researchers at RE who have strived to conduct investigations and contribute to the advancement of knowledge in financial criminology. Indeed, financial crime is complex and often escapes detection because of this complexity, and to compound matters, technological advances in this digital era have provided criminals greater opportunities to effectively commit financial crime. However, it should also be noted that these very same advances can help authorities to mitigate and curb financial crime activities. Hence, with financial crime mitigation towards sustainable development goals in the digital era as its theme, I'm certain this year's conference will offer valuable insights that are practical and relevant to the primary aim of the Sustainable Development Goals SDGs, which is to create a better world for people to enjoy peace and prosperity. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing recovery plans that have taken shape, I trust that the presentations and discussions at this conference will be a real opportunity for everyone concerned to rethink and readjust disrupted policies and social norms. This is the time for change, and I hope to hear of bold steps that can steer us back on track towards attaining the SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, sustainable development issues are fundamental within any decision-making ecosystem and has become more important than ever before. As the largest university in Malaysia, UiTM has always emphasized the importance of implementing the right SDG strategies. This has recently seen returns for the university when we rose significantly in the Times ranking for higher education recently. We are now ranked among the top 50 in SDG number 5, gender equality, and SDG number 17, partnerships. Additionally, UiTM is also ranked among the top 100 in SDG number 1, which is no poverty, and SDG number 4, which is quality education. While promoting research or publishing outcomes are essential, it is also vital that we engage in community service and outreach programs because knowledge generation must be transferred, and this is particularly true with respect to mitigating financial crime and disseminating knowledge about how each and every one of us has a role to play in sustainable development. Whether it is fraud or corruption, these criminal acts are real and increasing threats to governments and businesses alike. As academicians and practitioners, we can help combat financial crime through conferences such as ICFC and sharing deeper insights into the development and utilization of innovative tools that can curb such fraudulent activities. In turn, this creates greater awareness on the economic and social implications that will lead to stronger, more resilient communities. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, allow me to record my appreciation for the support we have continued to receive from the Royal Malaysian Police. Thank you very much to the Inspector General of Police, Yang dihormati Datuk Seri Akril Sani Abdullah Sani, for accepting our invitation to grace this occasion. Allow me to also thank our key speakers, participants, and all invited guests for participating in this year's conference. And congratulations as well to the organizing committee headed by Professor Jamaliah Said for their commitment to make ICFC 2021 a success. I hope this conference will prove to be a fruitful endeavor for all, and that your expectations will be well and truly met. Take care and stay safe, everyone. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Technologist Dr. Rozia Muhammad Chano, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic and International, exercising the functions of Vice Chancellor of UITM Malaysia, for her welcoming speech. University Technology Mara and ICFC 2021 would like to express our deepest gratitude to the Royal Malaysia Police for their continuous support of conference organization since 2015. We are so proud with achievements of Royal Malaysia Police in conserving our national security. Ladies and gentlemen, to early 2002 with the setting up of a special interest group at the Faculty of Accountancy of University Technology Mara. Then it evolved into a research center in 2005. And later in 2009, ARI was granted the status of Higher Institution Center of Excellence, or also known as High COE, by the Ministry of Higher Education Malaysia. ARI is further recognized internationally for its sustained initiative, commitments, and dedication towards advocating research in Islamic financial criminology. In tandem with government's aspiration of making Malaysia a global Islamic finance hub, ARI's commitment to research in Islamic financial criminology is not just timely, but extremely crucial for supporting a sustainable Islamic finance industry. And today, ARI continues to take lead in a range of initiatives within the domain of Islamic financial criminology on both at the national and global platforms. To date, ARI's initiatives have been recognized internationally, as illustrated by the many international awards it has received. Within 12 years of its inception, ARI has become a global leader in Islamic financial criminology. By then, let us listen to a few more details.
The Accounting Research Institute, ARI, of University Technology Mara, was awarded the status of a Higher Institution Center of Excellence, or High COE. ARI was tasked to become a global player in its niche area of Islamic financial criminology. and in doing so, support a national shift to a new economic model based on innovation, creativity, and high value-added activities. As Malaysia's only high COE that spearheads research in the area of accounting and finance, ARI has set up its own global research centers. ARI works closely with numerous agencies and industry players such as multinational companies, law enforcement agencies, financial institutions, and the government in providing them with products and services to enhance practices in good governance. We look forward to hearing from you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted and blessed today to have Yang Dihormati Datuk Sri Akril Sani Abdullah Sani, the Inspector General of Royal Malaysia Police, to give his officiating speech for our event, the 11th International Conference on Financial Criminology 2021. Please welcome our IGP.
May peace and blessings of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala be with you. I am delighted to be invited by the Accounting Research Institute, University Technology Mara, UITM, to be here today, and I am grateful to have this opportunity to speak to a distinguished group of individuals who share a common interest in financial criminology and who possess the knowledge and skills necessary to make a real difference in the war against financial crime. UITM has always been close to my heart, as 3 of my children were all graduates from these prestigious institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, economic crime, in particular money laundering and financial crime, has always been a threat to stability and can derail our desire to meet sustainable development goals. As the main law enforcement agency in the country, which combats corporate crimes, the Royal Malaysia Police takes this responsibility very seriously. We are fully committed in investigating any form of fraudulent operations which are detrimental not only to individuals who became victims, but to the society as well. Over the years, we have witnessed significant transformations in the trend and modus operandi of financial crime. Criminals have become more organized, and the nature of crimes we witness today are increasingly systematic and getting more sophisticated. Indeed, organized white-collar crime is a serious threat to our national prosperity. Over the years, white-collar crime has progressed in tandem with the development of trade and business technologies. The tremendous advance of technology has transformed the financial crime scenario, moving away from the conventional approach to one that is technology-based. As technology propels economic growth, new technologies have increased the speed of financial crime. Organizations make money from technologies. However, criminals also responded creatively to exploit the opportunities and create challenges to law enforcement authorities and legitimate businesses. And for this reason, I am supportive of the initiative by the Accounting Research Institute, University Technology Mara, in organizing a conference which is anchored to the theme of financial crime and its impact on sustainable development goals. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, as prescribed by the United Nations, applies to all member countries. It serves as a blueprint to achieve a better and sustainable future for all, and draws attention to the many global challenges at our doorsteps today, including those related to poverty, inequality, climate, and environmental degradations. While progress is being made to realize sustainable development goals, financial crime remains pervasive and is contributing to various illegal activities ranging from deforestation to human trafficking. Financial crime results in huge losses for governments and societies at large. Not only funds are being used for illicit activities, they also represent resources which can be put to better use for promoting awareness and achieving critical sustainability goals. It is of my sincere hope that this conference serves as a platform to move beyond discussions about the problems of financial crime to also deliberating on potential solutions. We must all think ahead on predicting the challenges of the future and making all the necessary preparations with the support of technology to be ahead of potential criminals in creating a safer environment. Early detection is essential in protecting individuals and society at large from criminal threats. Law enforcement agencies cannot address these challenges alone. Thus, organizations at risk of threats from financial crime should consider setting up internal operational mechanisms to uncover potential risks. Effective financial crime screening data may be an important consideration across a whole spectrum of business activities. For example, access to the right data may help in identifying the true beneficial owners of any entity. Data may also assist in mitigating risks to business at sea, where information on shipping vessels that include identity, locations, and ownership in screen process for potential links to financial crime. Our success in fighting financial crime lies in our ability to access information. Therefore, the open sharing of a transparent and reliable data and the intelligent use of leading-edge technology is important, even though it may not constitute a complete solution to financial, environmental, and other forms of crimes. Collaborations among all relevant authorities and agencies is utmost important in any concerted effort in combating criminal activities. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I would like to take this opportunity to once again congratulate the Accounting Research Institute, University Technology Mara, UITM, in organizing this international conference despite our limitations due to COVID-19 pandemic. I wish you all a very successful conference, and I hope the output of your deliberations will help us better address financial crime and keep us on course in achieving the aspirations of sustainable development goals. I take great pleasure in declaring open the 11th International Conference on Financial Criminology. Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause. Thank you, Yang dihormati Datuk Seri Akril Sani Abdullah Sani, the Inspector General of Royal Malaysia Police, for a meaningful speech and officiating the 11th ICFC 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, we proudly present to you the 11th International Conference on Financial Criminology 2021 with the theme of Financial Crime Mitigation Towards Sustainable Development Goals in a Digital Era. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Rob McCusker from Transnational Crime Director of Global Risk Alliance Limited, United Kingdom. Professor Rob McCusker was the former director of the Center for Fraud and Financial Crime within the School of Social Sciences, Business and Law at Teesside University. He was also the former transnational crime analyst for the Australian Institute of Criminology. Prof. Rob has also worked with a range of government, law enforcement, intelligence, and business organizations in a few jurisdictions, including the UK, USA, Thailand, New Zealand, the Pacific Islands, Australia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and Indonesia. He was a designated expert in economic crime and money laundering while he served as Federal Bureau of Investigation, or widely known as FBI. Without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Rob McCusker to give the keynote speech about the nature, threat, and mitigation of economic crime in a post-pandemic world. Please welcome Professor Rob McCusker.
Well, assalamu alaikum. A very good morning to you all. It's my great honor to be with you live from the UK at 2:30 in the morning. So this is my 2:30 in the morning face. Not quite sure I can follow Mr. James Bond, except to say my name's McCusker, Rob McCusker. I'm going to start the slides now. Hopefully. Here we go. I'm going to go off camera for a second because you've seen that I'm real, and then I won't be distracted by myself in the top corner there. So bear with me a second. Okay. Well, 2020 has been witness to a perfect storm of a global pandemic, severe economic impacts, and the constant drive by organized criminals and traditional fraudsters to exploit societal disconnects. We have seen pandemics before, of course, but none with as significant a set of consequences for global South and global North jurisdictions as COVID-19. Ironically, the rapid connectivity of jurisdictions through globalization has placed us all in a difficult strategic and economic position. COVID-19 has, of course, exacerbated a range of pre-existing global security concerns. Thus, the usual economic, environmental, geopolitical, societal, and technological threat vectors have seen a dramatic increase in certain pandemic-related areas of risk, including debt crises, of course, livelihood crises, and infectious diseases. And these continue to be impacted upon and exacerbate the other connected risks that you can see across the rest of that schematic. At the purely domestic consumer level, it's clearly evident that COVID-19 has had an impact upon fraud and fraud-related activities. Each of these topologies that you can see here demonstrate the ability of criminals to exploit our typical behavior patterns and the degree to which social engineering continues to resonate. Thus, in the old days, we had syntactic attacks where fraudsters and criminals attacked the computer, the machine, and nowadays, with our love of social media devices and social media platforms, that's now moved on to semantic attacks where we attack the person. And it's amazing how addicted people have become to social media of all kinds. And once you're addicted to social media and the desire to be loved by everybody in the world, you tend to let your guard down. So whereas you may not openly give your password or passcode to a stranger if he or she asks you for it, it's amazing how much information people are prepared to share online. And criminals have recognized during COVID-19 in particular, a lot of people have been turning to social media as their social life because they can't go out to restaurants, etc. And criminals have simply exploited that issue. More broadly, there were a number of clear threats and vulnerabilities evident during COVID-19. So the pandemic generated, of course, various government responses around the world, including social assistance. The host wants me to start my video, so the reason I turned it off is so I wouldn't be distracted by looking at myself, but I'm happy to keep it on for you if you wish. So social assistance and tax relief initiatives, enforced confinement measures, and travel restrictions. Now, with these responses, there were a number of underlying assumptions. Those included the fact that government, businesses, and individuals were increasingly turning to online systems to enable remote working, that individuals under lockdown increasingly turned to online platforms of their social interaction, which I've mentioned, and that businesses that were classified as non-essential physically closed their premises. However, both essential and non-essential businesses saw an increase in online sales. And that's had an unintended consequence of allowing criminals and terrorists to generate and launder illicit proceeds by exploiting the fact that everybody's online, everybody's sharing their credit card details on computers which may not have effective computer security mechanisms. We've also seen during COVID around the world a number of changing financial behaviours. So a number of bank offices and branches were closed due to public health concerns and general lockdown measures, preventing people from literally going to a bank. And customers therefore started to carry out more transactions remotely. This led, of course, to a sharp rise in social engineering type attacks, where we had a number of phishing emails. Those emails asked me to click on a dangerous link, and mobile messages sent through spam campaigns. Criminals exploited the concerns that people had about COVID-19 by inserting malware, malicious software onto personal computers and mobile devices under the pretext of being a government official offering you some sort of reporting mechanism for your COVID fears. And in one case, cyber criminals posed as the World Health Organization, who of course we've been turning to for support over these recent years, and in the guise of a WHO officer, sending email messages and mobile messages to lure individuals into clicking malicious links or opening malicious attachments. And this, of course, allowed the individual's username and passwords to be revealed to anybody who was observing. Now, during this period, of course, financial institutions arguably were not as well equipped as they might have been to identify customers' identity in a remote fashion, which is an important part of anti-money laundering, customer due diligence. Certain population segments, of course, may have been less familiar with using online platforms. And there are cases, therefore, of greater susceptibility to fraud amongst those population types, and strong indications of online fraud targeting the financial or account information of those online users increased during COVID. There's also been a tendency for people to go to unregulated financial services, and this correlates with previous economic downturns, including the fiscal crisis of 2007-8. This happens when you have a prolonged economic recession, which we're likely to go into post-COVID around the world, whereby those with financing needs but no support from their bank, for example, because they may have run out of money, they may not have any customers, they may have lost a contract because of COVID. Those people then turn to non-traditional or unlicensed lenders, including, in some jurisdictions, organized crime groups. And our traditional financial gatekeepers around the world, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, central banks in most jurisdictions, they have been so obsessed with business continuity, keeping the economy going, that they have perhaps not monitored suspicious transactions as well as they ought to have done, nor received reports from those who made such transaction reports. We know specifically, of course, during the pandemic, criminals attempted to profit from COVID-19 pandemic through increasing their fraudulent activity, particularly online activities. That included impersonating officials from government departments, from health authorities, from police services, and so forth. We've also seen a massive increase in counterfeiting, particularly of medicines. We've always had that, of course. Malaria drugs have always been counterfeited. Cigarettes, of course, have been counterfeited. But this was actually counterfeiting things like masks, which were then sold to companies, and their employees were put into great danger because the masks were not fit for purpose. We've also had quite a number of Europol and Interpol related cases where there have been multi-million-dollar fraudulent supplies of non-existent COVID-19 products, where the producers, so-called, of those products claim payment in advance, which was paid because companies got frantic at the beginning about protecting their workforce and protecting their customers. But of course, there was a complete failure to deliver goods. And because they were organized criminals involved, very, very little possibility of getting that money back. So the more important part of all of this, because we could have gone on for an entire day or more talking about COVID-related threats and cybercrime, corruption, money laundering, but that's not the most important thing. It's important how we go on from here. So in terms of mitigation of economic crime, the first thing we have to tackle, of course, is the notion of risk management, which we all talk about, and most organizations pretend or act as if they have risk management processes in place. Now, risk management has always been something of a balancing act between the identification of real risk and the degree to which that risk is properly responded to. Now, there's an argument that risk management has tended to become enshrined in policies, procedures, and a sort of tick box threat matrix mentality, through which the real and pressing risk organization may go unnoticed. You'll note the name of this ship, and despite all of its risk management strategies, it did forget about the big iceberg dead ahead. If we don't think about risk management in a sort of more open, lateral thinking way, we're likely to be guilty of repeating historical mistakes which we made before COVID hit, where our perception of an issue falls dramatically short of the reality on the ground, with inevitable and serious consequences. Now, in that context, organizations are in danger, which is heightened during a pandemic and in the post-pandemic phases of the world, of treating risk management as an exercise in management with fixed, unchanging points of reference, rather than, as it is or should be, an exercise in mitigating risk. This means in many organizations, risk management tends to owe more to luck than judgment. And if you look at any major fraud survey, you'll find that the biggest source of fraudulent activity in terms of recognizing activity is a tip, either internal or external. Now, if you're relying on people noticing that something's wrong, rather than you as an organization finding out what's wrong, then you're likely to run into some serious complications in your risk management strategy. Now, in cases involving previous pandemics or financial crises, it's become commonplace to draw upon concepts such as the black swan or the grey rhino, which I'll touch upon in a moment. And these are used or have been used to provide the context for our response, or lack of response in some cases, to the event in question. And COVID-19, as you can see by the mask that the rhino is wearing, is no exception. Now, for those who aren't aware, a black swan event is an event which moves beyond the realm of our regular expectation, our regular experience, our regular anticipation. And it carries a very extreme impact. It's called a low likelihood, high probability event. And the crucial thing about the black swan event, for all of the experts you'll no doubt have seen in TV studios around the world, is that once this unexpected event has happened, everybody comes out of the woodwork to explain, after it's arrived, exactly how it got there. So there's always plenty of experts after the event to explain COVID, for example. So you get a situation where people claim that everything that's happened is perfectly explicable, perfectly predictable if we just thought about it. And you get, therefore, sort of retrospective predictability. People who come out and say, if you'd asked me, I could have told you this was going to happen. And of course, they're never there when you need them. Now, the originator of the black swan concept actually argues that COVID-19 is not, in fact, a black swan event, because there was nothing intrinsic within COVID-19 as compared to other pandemics, which, on the basis of our previous experience, we could not quite easily have noted. The more applicable model, perhaps, therefore, is so-called grey rhino. And this is where you have a highly probable event. If you sat down and thought about it for just a moment, you'd think, oh, well, if we have a disease which crosses jurisdictions, and people start to succumb to the disease, that's going to have a massive impact on virtually everything in the economy. Therefore, we need to act in this particular way. In other words, as with COVID, we did actually see it charging straight at us, and we had a number of choices to respond. Now, different governments around the world did things differently. New Zealand shut its borders immediately, and the only case it had was of a British tourist transiting through the airport. One person. Australia has had in the low hundreds of deaths. United Kingdom was ramped up beyond all recognition because our government, rightly or wrongly, decided to focus on keeping the economy going rather than ensuring that people's health was secure. We can't blame governments for taking these decisions. It's happened now. But if you've observed the UK at any distance, you'll see that we had a number of faltering policy decisions being made where we keep on changing our minds. You wear a mask on a Tuesday, but not on a Wednesday. You shut your eyes and hold your breath on a Friday, and it was getting a little bit ridiculous. There is, of course, a point, an argument to be made that it's actually, as it always was, and is in most cases, the elephant in the room. The obvious risk, which anybody looking at avian flu, swine flu, even going back a century, smallpox, influenza, could have spotted this coming. And therefore, our risk management strategies as governments was perhaps not as good as it could have been. The biggest problem with risk management, particularly in private sector organizations, but also in public sector organizations, is the dreaded risk appetite, which is the mantra which most organizations stand by. Now, in practice, in my experience, risk management tends to be concerned with a sort of inverse proposition. The question asked is not, how much will it cost us to mitigate the risk that you've identified, Rob, but rather, how much of the risk that you've identified can we mitigate for the amount of money we're prepared in our budget to spend? And that is a recipe for disaster, because you're always going to fit the risk into the amount of money you have to spend, rather than the other way around. And risk, of course, is ever expanding, never evolving. Now, although we've seen clear problems with risk management in terms of money laundering and corruption, risk appetite has also given rise recently, given the global supply chain and the impact of COVID upon it, of a disquieting emergence of the management of the risk of modern slavery within that supply chain. Now, I was privy to a corporate risk management document, which I put on the screen with the relevant bits hidden, which indicated to me the number of slaves per $1 million spent. This type of cost-benefit analysis, whereby risk is deemed to be managed by the organization because the number of potential slaves falls below a particular threshold, is morally repugnant, particularly given the SDGs that we've been talking about so far today. Even if it does allow, in this case, this risk manager to sleep at night. Now, when I responded to this schema, the company that produced it was fired, because I said, that's no way. You're talking about human beings here, and all you're worried about is making sure you don't spend too much money on dealing with modern slavery. Shame on you. And they took note. Now, many organizations, of course, still adopt the 3 lines of defense model. And this, I'm sure you know, concerns management control as the first line of defense, risk and compliance as the second line, and internal audit as the third line. Now, for any organization that utilizes this 3 lines approach, it's important that in order to identify and respond to a particular threat vector, organizations should attempt to ascertain whether there is or might be ambiguous responsibilities for key activities within the organization, and whether a lack of clarity over this level of responsibility could lead to those responsibilities becoming blurred, and or the control and monitoring of risk becoming weaker. What do I mean by ambiguity? Well, in many cases, there is a lack of first line accountability, where there's a tendency for first line managers, whether they mean to or not doesn't matter, to neglect their responsibilities and leave the second line of defense to take up the slack. Now, it's important, of course, for the three lines of defense to operate separately, because they are three lines, almost like a castle, series of castle walls. And it's important that within those separate offices, they each contribute to the effective management, monitoring, and assurance of risk. But they should not, as often happens, operate in silos. They should talk to one another. What tends to happen is that they regard themselves as separate from one another, with their own team, their own way of working, and therefore you get some disasters happening. If we look at the banking sector, for example, last year, a deal was struck with Austrac, our financial intelligence unit in Australia, and Westpac Bank. And the settlement was for $1.3 billion penalty against Westpac for alleged breaches of the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorist Financing Act of 2006 on 23 million separate occasions, including the failure to report international funds transfers on more than 19.5 million occasions, failing to appropriately assess and monitor risks connected to the movement of money into and out of Australia through correspondent banking relationships, which are already something the Financial Action Task Force is concerned about, failing to maintain an AML-CTF program, and failure to carry out appropriate customs due diligence. Now, that is one of Australia's biggest banks, with the three lines of defence model. Clearly wasn't working on 23 million occasions, but apart from that, it was great, and they're to be congratulated. And back in the UK earlier this year, the Financial Conduct Authority, who I've mentioned briefly already, now criminal proceedings against NatWest Bank, against one of our biggest banks, for its failure to comply with money laundering regulations during a 5-year period involving £264 million in cash deposits. Cash deposits. Cash, of course, is what criminals like to use more than anything. We've also seen in the last year or so similar incidents at Danske Bank and ING Bank. If I return briefly to the Titanic to show that this three lines of defense has always had its issues, the three lines of defense for the Titanic were the bulkheads. Everyone's heard about these, or read about it, or seen it on the movie, where we have these watertight compartments. We have 16 bulkheads, and you could flood any 2 of them and the ship would still stay upright. And the doors could be controlled automatically from the bridge, so you didn't have to physically be there in case there was too much water in the cabin. Second line of defense was an inner hull, which would protect the ship if should the outer hull be breached. And the third was the wireless telegraph, which could be used to advise a ship of weather conditions and hazards to navigation. Problem with this, of course, is those bulkheads didn't have any ceilings. So as soon as the water rose to the top of the bulkhead, it would automatically flow over to the next room. And that's how so many compartments got flooded at the same time. It's a bit like having a house with no roof and wondering why you keep getting wet. The other issue was that the inner hull was fine, but it also got sheared in two because of the way in which the ship was struck. Had it been struck from the front, it would have been fine, but because it got struck at the side by the iceberg, very cheap iron rivets simply sheared off. So far more of the ship came apart than was possible. The wireless telegraph, of course, we've all heard about the first SOS message from telegraph, but part of the reason there was no monitoring of iceberg warnings is because the very rich passengers in first class insisted on sending telegraphs almost constantly from the telegraph room, rather than it being used for what it's supposed to be used for, listening out for danger signals from other shipping. And the biggest problem, of course, was that the captain did put someone in the crow's nest right above the top of the ship to act as a lookout during what was an iceberg season. But unfortunately, they couldn't find the binoculars for the person to use, so he couldn't see anything And had he had those binoculars, he probably would have seen the iceberg in time for the ship to take avoiding action. Now, we've learned a lot from the Titanic, but not as much, unfortunately, as I would like. We've also got, in terms of risk management, to regain a bit of perspective. Now, what is a risk? Now, airport security, you'd think and hope in modern day would be top notch, top of its game. But we were called to an Air New Zealand flight many years ago where there was a strong smell of fuel in the cabin. And when we asked the crew where the smell was coming from, they pointed to the middle part of the plane. And we went down to where there was a passenger sitting underneath a particular bin. We asked the passenger to open the bin, and the fumes almost knocked us over. We asked him to take the bag down, put it on the floor, which he did with a big clunk. We asked him to open the bag, and inside the bag was a fully fueled chainsaw. And when we asked him what happened at security, he said, well, it set off all the alarms, but it wasn't on the list. In other words, because the risk management at the airport was considered to be looking only for items on a list, literally on a pictogram, because chainsaw wasn't there, the operator didn't think the chainsaw could be a risk because it wasn't there. Now, of course, had that person got the chainsaw out during the flight and started it, he could have gone through the cockpit door, the side of the plane, and everyone would have died. Luckily, he was just a timber man on his way to a job, and therefore there wasn't a disaster that could easily have been. I want you to imagine for a moment that airlines were all publicly rated as high, medium, or low risk. Would you fly on any airline? How would you choose? Would you ever fly on a high risk airline? Now, one would hope and expect that we would all have a number of pertinent questions to ask about how the risk was configured, how it was assessed, and the extent to which changes in the evolution of risk were tracked and built into a revised risk matrix for those airlines. Now, one would hope that such questions are routinely asked and acted upon in any organization in relation to any risk. Now imagine you were to leave the determination of risk in a country to which a loved one of yours was to travel to your organization's risk management team, utilizing their usual methodology for assessing risk. What evidence would you expect to see? If we don't ask the same questions in relation to corporate or other organizational risk as we would in relation to our loved ones, to what extent are we actually managing risk? To what extent do we really appreciate what the real world risk is? The danger is, I believe, that we have become drawn into a sort of cost-benefit culture, set within a pressured and dynamic supply chain, where the contract is king and the actual or perceived risk secondary, particularly where if we expressed our risk concerns, the deal would be scuppered and we wouldn't be very popular with our company. The post-COVID world, in which there will be a natural determination to rapidly place economies back onto an even keel, is the one environment in which effective real-world risk management will be more important than ever. Now, I recognize, of course, that risk is part of life, but I simply do not believe that the trade-off is or should be the dilution or reconfiguration of actual risk into something more perceptually benign when it is or may be anything but, as with the modern slavery type example. If this represents our grasp of the real nature of risk, then our risk management response will always undermine our attempts to mitigate real risk. If we imagine that risk management should involve us knowing the threat environment like the back of our hands, many organizations still focus on traditional threats they know they might experience because they've experienced in the past. We need organizations to move towards anticipating threats that evolve and that occur regionally and globally and not just nationally. Now, I've only got a minute or so left, so I won't dwell too long on this, but this is just one example of what a basic risk management strategy for looking at modern slavery in the supply chain should look at a very basic level. Not number of slaves per $1 million spend, but proper mapping, proper data collection, asking all sorts of questions about all of your suppliers, all of your raw materials, and everything in between. And this, as I said, is just a basic outline, which I shared with that organization in question to show them that they needed to start thinking much more dynamically and intuitively than they had done. Importantly, at the point at which you think you've understood your organization's risk profile, carry on looking. A uniformly rosy outlook should prompt concern, not comfort. Thank you very much indeed. Bang on time with 5 seconds to spare. You can't say better than that. That's very James Bond-like. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Professor Rob McCasker, for your wonderful sharing on the keynote on the nature, threat, and mitigation of economic crime in a post-pandemic world. Can't get enough of you, Prof. Thank you again.
Thank you very much indeed. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Storm here almost now.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sacrificing your sleeping time with us.
Sweet dream, Prof.
Thank you. Hope to see you all in 2022 at some point.
All right. Okay.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.